tell you that, but I think I'll tell you why a little bit differently. And also, we need to talk about the Chiefs in the red zone and how Patrick Mahomes is actually against the Broncos, at least, was part of the problem. And I'm not even drinking a buy drink today. Up is down, black is white, cats are marrying dogs. It's chaos on the street. Let's talk some Chiefs. Welcome to the Chief of the North here on RGR Football. I am Seth Kaiser, a Minnesota Chiefs fan, or the Chief of the North, however you want to think of me. As we do every week here, I want to talk just a little bit about what happened in the most recent Chiefs game. Obviously, that was last Thursday at this point. The Chiefs are now on to the Chargers, whose season is sort of on the line. They're staring at 2-4 if they lose to the Chiefs, and the Chiefs going to 6-1. That's not an insurmountable lead, but it would require a meltdown of cataclysmic proportions by the Chiefs for the Chargers to catch up, and of course them going on an epic streak of their own. So it's going to be an interesting Sunday. But of course, I want to look back at a few of the things that I think are important, as we do every week, in terms of what we saw from last week's game. Because of the timing of the game and everything like that, I'm not going to do mailbag questions today, and I apologize for that. I try to do that every week. If you do have mailbag questions, put them in the comment section below, put a question mark before them, and I try to prioritize those every week, with the exception of this week. So does that make me a liar? It's hard to say, but it is what I'm doing this week. And so make sure to throw some questions in there. I look forward to them every week. They make this job so much fun and easier also, which maybe that's correlated to the fun. Anyway, I want to talk a little bit about Rashee Rice, who's been a very popular topic of conversation this week. There's a lot of people who really like the things that Rice has done. He stood out on multiple plays in terms of his explosion after the catch. Everyone's focused on that. He's the first person that I wrote about in the Chief of the North newsletter, was his ability to explode upfield and get extra yards after the catch on, for example, a simple slant where he's able to, with just a little bit of separation, grab an extra 15 plus yards. That's a huge deal with him. You saw it again on the 3rd and 17. The way he explodes up the field, he turns 3rd and 17 into about 4th and 2, 4th and 2.5. That makes it an actual question of, do we just go for it here? No, they didn't, for obvious reasons. But that explosion and that ability after the catch is something that the Chiefs are starting to really weaponize. And that's important with how they work their offense, having guys that can create yardage. We talked about this before the season in terms of Kadarius Toney, but Rashee Rice has demonstrated the ability to take a play that should be a 3-yard gain and turn it into an 8-yard gain, or an 8-yard gain and turn it into a 15-yard gain or more, et cetera, et cetera. It exponentially builds up. The idea of yardage creation is one of the most important things you can do at the NFL level. It's what sets players apart often. It's one of the more valuable skill sets in terms of grabbing extra yardage, because what that can mean is your players can compensate and to a play design not working, right? And so it's one less wasted play. Or they can take a good play and make it more explosive, right? And Rashee Rice has shown that ability. That's the reason a lot of people are calling for him to be on the field more, and I think that's definitely important. I think just as important is the fact that he's shown some comfort against zone coverage, and he's shown the ability to sit and wait in the right spot, make the correct read, because let's say 47 here had drifted farther over, then he's going to want to come right here instead. But he didn't. And it's kind of interesting because Mahomes does kind of keep his eyes over in this direction of the field. So I'm curious what 47 is thinking here. I'm assuming, I believe we had, I think Sky Moore was over here, or another receiver was for sure. And so he ends up, I think, focusing too much on there. But Rashee Rice, he sits down in the correct spot, wraps his route around 49 here. That's not necessarily as easy as it looks in terms of executing it perfectly to where you're ready for the ball to be delivered, even as you're still on the move. And then, of course, he gets up the field, picks up a ton of yards. It's worth noting that was on a critical 3rd down, that where the Chiefs were trying to run out the clock and also maybe put some extra points on the board. But that was one that they really needed to convert. And I like the fact that they were willing to call Rice and Kelsey as part of a 2-man game. That's just worth noting here. So what this little route combination does, if you're anticipating zone coverage, is it sets conflict here for both of these defenders. The idea being had 49, seeing Rice coming, he comes over here. Then the ball goes to Kelsey, which is kind of interesting because there's another defender who's getting ready to squeeze Kelsey here. They were terrified of Travis Kelsey. They were bracketing him all game. But the reality is he's just beyond the stick, so 49 has to defend that route, which means if you've got a receiver who knows where to wrap it around, like we just talked about, that allows you to run that route combination and run it well. Seeing stuff like that, and I saw that a little bit against the Vikings. We've seen that in some other games this year where Rice does look comfortable feeling his way through zone coverages, varying the speed of his routes, wrapping his routes around the correct defender and stopping in the right spots. You can see the raw materials there of a guy who can play well against zone coverage. And even teams that are the most man coverage happy teams in the league, they're usually, you don't get a ton of pure man coverage in the NFL. You're going to see man coverage maybe a third of the time, maybe 40% of the time, at most, really. Other than that, you're going to see a lot of zones, a lot of mixed stuff, and man match type things. Which it's essentially a blend of man and zone. Smarter people than me can explain it a lot better than that. But it's the idea of no, sorry, I'm allergic to complicated things. It's the idea of man matches. Essentially, you're starting off waiting in a zone for a receiver to be in your area, but then he's your receiver rather than that being your zone and you passing him off in coverage. It's a way to kind of utilize some of the best things out of both of them, but it can be tough to execute. So anyway, with man coverage or with zone coverage being as prevalent as it is in the NFL, you need guys who can break that up. It's one of the things that Juju Smith-Schuster added of value last season was his ability to come open in zone coverages when Travis Kelsey was getting zone plus, where they are playing a zone coverage, but it's a blend where they're also haloing him and adding someone else around him to where he's bracketed more firmly than anyone else is, to where, even despite the fact that he's a wizard against zone, he maybe can't come open. Juju Smith-Schuster was a guy who could find those openings, and it's one of the reasons why their offense was successful. Having a guy who can do that in Rice would be a huge value add. The thing that makes me interested in Rice in terms of seeing his continued development, I want to see how he is learning to get separation against man coverage. So this snap here, this isn't a pure man look. Although this is where you might get something like a man match, either that or just you had some pretty aggressive looks here within the zone because of the way that the route is breaking off. Because you can see you're more of a pure zone on the other side of the field. And so what you have here, though, it might as well be a man coverage type snap because you end up just a one-on-one situation. And what Rice does here, he frees his hands, uses a little physicality to get some separation inside. That's something that I'm seeing a little more from him as he seems to start to understand what traits he has that can allow him to separate against man coverage. One of the problems that Rashee Rice had in college was he wasn't a natural separator against man coverage. His top speed isn't terrific. And while he's got fairly flexible hips, he's not a super agile guy. His change of direction isn't incredible. But he can accelerate very well. And he is agile enough. He's not quick, but he's agile. And there's a difference between those two things. But when you take some agility, really good separation and good physicality, you have the tools there to break down man coverage. You just need to consistently get into the body of the corner, force them to make a decision with how they're going to follow you with that explosion, and then utilize physicality to get away from them. That's something that he's been doing. In terms, again, using a little bit of physicality to separate. You saw it against the Vikings here, just a really quick win on a slant where he uses his body in terms of not just shielding off, but freeing those hands and using his strength to shrug off the contact to get open quickly and then make a strong catch knowing that he's going to get contact. And so the final thing that I like about Rice, about why I think he needs to get on the field more, is the fact that he is showing more and more the ability to kind of keep working on that second play. He actually, against Denver, could have been targeted on an additional play. So here, when he sees Mahomes, this ended up being a throwaway. He runs a whip, isn't really open initially, but he immediately gets into more of a scramble drill situation. He sees Mahomes is running. He tries to provide a body. He sees the defender get upfield, utilizes physicality to create separation. That could have been a first down there. Probably going to end up charting that as a missed shot by Mahomes. I haven't finished that film review yet. So those are just a few things to really like about Rice in terms of he's got a lot to work on still in terms of being on the same page as Mahomes, learning the entire route tree, and understanding how to utilize his skill set to get separation. But the materials are there, and there's some consistency there too through 6 weeks. So That's something that I think they need to develop more, which goes into our next topic. The next thing that I wrote about on the Chief of the North newsletter, you can check it out right now. It actually just went live as I record this, was issues in the red zone. I said red zone, red light. I felt very proud of that because I'm not great with headlines. And so what I did was I went back and I looked at the Chiefs' red zone failures against the Broncos, trying to figure out why in a game where they're averaging 5.6 yards per play, which is a very respectable number, where they didn't have a single pure 3 and out, how you only put up 19 points in that situation. And there's a few different things to talk about. The article goes over most of it. Well, it goes over all of it, of course. But one thing I do want to talk about that I think I'll be getting more into in this week's film review is that in a pretty rare occasion, Patrick Mahomes wasn't blameless with some of the red zone struggles. Now, there was a bunch of other stuff going on. Denver actually just played really good defense on some red zone snaps. And that's where you have to remember that the name on the back of the jersey doesn't matter if they're making a good play. Like, it's not, so say on the Chiefs' first drive when they're facing 3rd and 3 and they've got Kadarius Toney open on a good look, appropriately called play here, the blocking's fine. And you see this MVS causes a little bit of hesitation. Toney runs inside. He's past the sticks. He's open. The ball's getting delivered. Should be a first down. And the defensive tackle here just times his jump and the swat here perfectly. This play doesn't care whether or not the Denver Broncos were a historically bad defense prior to that play. All that matters is why this play failed. And it didn't fail because Mahomes made a bad read. It didn't fail because Andy Reid made a bad call. And it didn't fail because the receivers didn't execute or the offensive line. The other team gets paid too. And sometimes they just make a play. So that's an example of there were a few times in the red zone where Denver was really ready for what the Chiefs like to throw at teams in the red zone to kind of put defenders into conflict. They did a great job on some of those jet sweep looks. They just did overall a good job not taking the bait in terms of things that would put them out of position. And you could tell that Vance Joseph has played Andy Reid multiple times, especially recently. You could also tell the Chiefs were utilizing a lot of designs that they've used previously. Outside of some of their really wacky stuff, it was stuff that they've used before. So that's a big part of it. The other part of it was some execution failures on the parts of the Chiefs. And you can take a look at what some of the receivers could have been doing better. Absolutely true. But it wasn't just a pure case of, well, no one's ever getting open. And to kind of make that point, I'm gonna look at the 3rd and 8 on their second failed red zone drive. So this is the one that this is the interception play, right? And so first I'm going to show you the screenshot, and then we're just going to look at the play to where you kind of have an idea what I'm talking about. So Sky Moore ends up matched up on the right side where he's basically on an island with no safety help necessarily deep. He runs essentially in a deeper whip route than what you might normally see, but he does a pretty good job with it in terms of getting far enough upfield to get the defender to try to come in and create some lever and cut off the inside, which really the defender comes in too far considering you've got another defender here. This is where the first down marker is. This defender comes too far inside. He doesn't need to come this far inside. He's got help over the middle. And Mahomes' initial read is Kelsey. And so that does drag this defender a little bit over here, which is part of the route combination. It leaves Moore isolated. So Moore runs the whip, and you can see he's got, not a ton, just a step or two of inside leverage, but he's also got this distance to where if the ball gets thrown out here, and you can see Mahomes is looking at him here, if the ball gets thrown out here, he's got a decent shot of picking up the first down or something at least very close. And you can see what happens instead. So you see Moore make the break. You see how out-leveraged he is in terms of timing of his steps, especially because Moore is breaking in outside again, a step in front of him. You see that ball could come out and get thrown to around this spot right here. You make that throw, and he's maybe got the ability, and I think he does, given that he's got him out leveraged, to turn the corner and get very close to that first down marker. Instead, Mahomes, after he sees that, Kelsey has defenders all over the place, he does turn back and looks at Moore, but then he passes him by and goes back to the other side of the field again. Here's where the ball should come out, but then he turns back up the field. Then eventually he turns back to Moore. Pressure has time to get home in the meantime, and he ends up, and by the way, just on a side note, he's probably looking at the defender grabbing his leg. But there's a hesitation here. This clutch right there is where things break down. No one's open. He tries to throw it up because Moore, seeing that the initial route is now covered, because that's how fast that can happen, he tries to break up field. Mahomes is trying to hit him here, probably around the back corner of the end zone, because he thinks, oh, he trusts him here. The funny thing is, well, first, the funny thing is his arm gets hit, so then it floats short and it becomes an easy pick. The funny thing to me is that he trusts Moore to try to throw this up to him, working his way down the field. Maybe it's Rice working his way back, but I really think he's still looking at Moore here and is trying to create some drive right there. Now that's a throw that you make to a guy that you really trust. The interesting thing to me is that he trusts Moore there, but he doesn't trust him right here. And that's something that Patrick Mahomes is going to need to work on. Sky Moore is getting a lot of heat from the fans, and some of it is deserved. He hasn't quite developed as much as you would hope. I would say against Denver, though, he did get himself open a few times. Now, some of the times, the read was elsewhere. It wasn't necessarily they were all missed shots. But on this play in particular, Moore does his job by and large, and Mahomes needs to release that throw. And I've seen that a few times, not just with Moore, but with a few of the other receivers, where Mahomes is clutching it rather than releasing it. And there's just not as much confidence in the receiver room as we maybe saw start to formulate down the stretch last year. It's worth noting that at this time last year, we were talking about the receiver room and whether or not it could provide the things that Mahomes needed. So that just takes time to build. And I think the idea is you throw these young guys into the fire this year, and they certainly are. And by the time you get to weeks 12, 13, 14, 15, you start to really figure out who's who and who can be trusted to do what. So hopefully that's another step in the progression for Mahomes and Moore. But it's at least worth noting that Patrick Mahomes wasn't blameless for the Chiefs' problems in the red zone. The good news, he's Patrick Mahomes. I'm guessing he'll figure it out. All right, that's what I got time for today. I appreciate all of you. Make sure you hit like, subscribe, do all the YouTube things or wherever you get your podcasts. Do all the things that support the RGR team. Just lots of great people here, and I'm here too. So I appreciate you all. Make sure to hit any mailbag comments you want to hit. We'll talk following the Chiefs, hopefully beating the Chargers. I'll actually be there, driving down for the game Sunday. Should be a lot of fun. If you happen to see me, please say hi. I always love saying hi to people, and the support means so much to me. It's deeply appreciated. You know what? The Chiefs are 5-1. Alone in the standings at the top of the AFC because of the conference record tiebreaker with Miami. And, it's once again a great time to be a Chiefs fan.